Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our R&D Workbench webinar. My name is Danielle McDowell. I am the Event Marketing Specialist here at Highpoint Solutions. And to start us off today, I would like to welcome Kevin Stuck. Kevin is the Senior Director for Strategic Industry Alliances for Healthcare and Life Science at Salesforce. He leads the Healthcare and Life Science Partner Alliance for Salesforce, and his experience spans healthcare administration, sales and marketing, and professional services in healthcare, pharma, and enterprise software. Take it away, Kevin.
Thanks so much, Danielle. As Danielle mentioned, I'm the Strategic Director for Alliances for Healthcare and Life Sciences at Salesforce. And on behalf of Highpoint and Salesforce's Healthcare and Life Sciences team, I'd like to welcome everybody to today's seminar. So today's seminar, we're really excited to bring to you Highpoint's Salesforce solution. This is a clinical trials design memory solution. It's an integrated 360-degree platform for life sciences organizations. So what does that mean for life science organizations? Well, it brings a comprehensive solution that takes a look at really helping out with institutional memory. And what does that mean? The value to capture and leverage the institutional knowledge, the right way to give return on all the big investments organizations have made to try to bring new products to market. Second piece is really transparency to your clinical design process with a lightly structured framework and a highly structured process. And the end result is accelerating your processes to results. Now, many organizations have attempted to build these types of solutions, only to find their solutions are way too cumbersome and not intuitive. Highpoint's expertise has really created solutions that let people work the way that they want to work, with flexibility and a comprehensive framework. So I mentioned full force solutions. What is a full force solution? At Salesforce, it's a way in which we identify, define, and present to our customers market-proven and referenceable solutions. And we do that with our most market-leading partners. So, but not only has Highpoint developed a proven, repeatable solution that you're going to see today, it also has a talented resource team you need to bring these solutions to your organization. So as you learn about this solution today, let Highpoint help you start a discussion on how the clinical trials design memory solution can really impact you and your organization. If we take a look at the agenda, we'll start out with a little bit of meeting agenda, objectives to the kickoff, and then also take a look at customer success stories with our great customer, AstraZeneca. We'll get a demonstration of the clinical trials memory design solution, an overview of the R&D Workbench, and then wrap it up with some Q&A and a chance for everyone to ask questions to the Highpoint team. The speakers that will be on today, I've had the privilege to work closely with Lior Keet. He's Vice President of Highpoint's Life Science R&D practice. And as I'd mentioned, Jim Ringboom, Senior Life Science Solution Delivery Manager for AstraZeneca, and Roman Kudjakov, who will be doing the demonstration. So I think you'll see from this team a very exciting solution that is proven in the marketplace and a wonderful demonstration of Highpoint skills. And in closing, I'd like to thank the Highpoint team for today's webinar and on their terrific solution. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Laura.
Well, thank you, Kevin, for the introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lior Keet from Highpoint Solutions. I'm the Vice President for Life Sciences R&D. So we are prepared to meet the following key objectives for today's session. First, we would like to provide the audience an overview of the current dynamics and challenges associated with clinical trial design. Secondly, we want to provide an understanding to the audience, a framework with respect to a recent success story at AstraZeneca, in which we're going to highlight the capabilities of Salesforce as a platform to address the core challenges around trial design. And then we want to be able, within that same framework of the success story, to highlight a broader understanding to the audience with respect to the challenges that AstraZeneca had to overcome and how the capabilities specifically around the memory design solution address those challenges. And then finally, we want to be able to talk through any questions that you might have as an audience. So at this point, I would like to turn things over to Bill.
Thank you, Lior, and good day, everyone. Very, very happy to be a part of the discussion today.
It would probably be best for me to begin with a bit of an overview of the history of the problem within my organization and how I became involved with the effort at delivering the solution. So I joined AstraZeneca in late 2014, and one of my first assignments was to decommission an internally developed application that was aimed to serve as a standard and central repository for all the information that's collected and thus decisions are based upon during the development of a clinical trial. So upon the decommission of the system, the failures of the system, which we'll touch upon a little bit here in the following slides, does not supersede the fact that it still is a use case and a problem that's within our organization, and the leadership within the group that the system was developed to serve still felt that it was a valid use case and we should put a little effort into exploring additional potential solutions on the topic. So this slide is aimed at delivering a little bit of overview of the problem within the industry, not necessarily within AstraZeneca, because we were a part of a cross-industry consortium of people that were collaborating on potential solutions to this problem. Basically, at the end of the day, I'd like to touch upon bullet point 2 and 3 in particular. So 1/3 of the issues raised by authorities originated by program designs not generating supportive evidence. Basically, what that boils down to is we have no insight into why we made particular decisions in a clinical trial design, and we're seeing investigators raising these questions more and more frequently. And bullet point 3, trial design often based on last experiences, opinions, and trial and error. Basically, what that distills down to is we're developing each of our clinical trials as if it's the first design of a clinical trial that we were doing. We have no mechanisms for lessons learned or past experiences to help us expedite the development of future clinical trials. So what does that mean within AstraZeneca? What we decided to do was to sit down and amongst ourselves internally and decide what were the challenges and the requirements that the predecessor solution did not meet, and what do we need in a future potential solution to meet our use cases and our user requirements. So our business objectives are fairly understood from the predecessor slide. Increasing the clinical trials output puts more pressure on selecting the right clinical trial to be performed. So what investments decisions are we making and why? Lack of tools to both streamline the clinical trials development process as well as to make it flexible enough to reflect constantly changing conditions. I think it warrants at least noting that this particular group of people are working within later stage clinical trials, so any trial design discussions that this group of people are participating in could be considered critical path compounds to a large extent. And any extra effort that's invested into the trial's preparation just delays decision making, which naturally affects our time to market in the long run. So the expected outcomes was to provide a tool that supports the clinical studies development, fosters collaboration, facilitates information sharing, and to a large extent, the third bullet point in the expected outcomes was probably the most critical user requirement: ensure usability that improves productivity without disruption. So some of the key outcomes of our clinical trial design memory tool was we formulated an application on top of Salesforce that enables the user community to capture those decisions. So one of the biggest failures of the predecessor solution was the lack of intuitiveness. Although it had a lot of very sophisticated features and capabilities in ranking decisions over another and trying to give some sort of system intelligence to what decisions we should be making, those decisions are typically made by expert personnel, and we weren't really looking at relying upon an application to solve that riddle for us. What we were dealing with is the system was not intuitive enough for the people who were responsible for managing and coordinating the collection of this information to put the information into. So in large part, it was seen as a data entry step that nobody had time or capacity to perform later in the game. So the first overarching requirement that we needed to prove that we can meet with this application was the ability to put the information in large part, time of capture or time of collection. So as you can imagine, the folks that are responsible for leading this portion of the development work, they don't have the luxury of having everybody sitting in a room face-to-face to capture this information in a centralized manner. There's TCONs and WebExes and emails and text messages and chatter posts within our organization and all of these different disparate communication mechanisms where all of these things are coming to this particular role for them to make sense out of it, organize it, categorize it, get all the necessary subject matter expertise's opinion on it to drive to an ultimate decision. It needs to be unified and integrated, as in if everybody's not using the same platform, then we're not going to get the output and able to understand why we've chosen a particular path over another.
We were able to centralize the historical data, so we are able to see over time drug teams that have dealt with particular risks or particular operational considerations previously. People are now able to learn and understand why they chose certain decisions over another, and overall it provides efficiency, as in we're able to learn these things at a click or on a single screen rather than digging through SharePoint sites and meeting minutes and so on and so forth. So how did Salesforce.com become a part of this solution assessment? At the end of 2014, when we began exploring potential options for this problem, there were a number of options on the table. And Salesforce came up as it was already an internally understood and consumed application within the organization. We had support structures around it. We had a team of people that managed the platform within our organization. Licensing was understood. And although it already had a very strong footprint within our commercial organization as a CRM tool, we're starting to see within AstraZeneca, we're leveraging Salesforce.com applications for many other reasons and use cases outside of just the commercial group and the commercial needs. So under the traditional development, you see this kind of depicts the steps that need to go through when you're starting something, initiating a project. You need to talk about scale and performance. You need to talk about your security model. You need to vet whether it needs to be mobile accessible or not and what that means. And all of those discussions need to take place before you even get to the data and process design element of the discussion. What the Salesforce platform offered to us is all of those things were already understood. We knew those, and we could drive directly to the data process and design discussions with our subject matter experts and our user community. And due to the failure of the predecessor solution, it was of utmost importance that we were able to go straight to those discussions because, as you can imagine, spending that time and that effort on an effort that ultimately failed because of lack of user adoption, we didn't have the luxury of having the time to sort out all of those traditional development type discussions that you would have to go through in order to actually engage your user community at the end of it. So leveraging the Salesforce.com platform allowed us to be immediately in touch with those subject matter experts to begin designing a tool rather than discussing all the other things that need to come in when you're building an application from scratch, so to speak. So this slide is a little bit aimed at showing how we were able to move as quickly as we have. So I want to just talk a little bit about our delivery as in compared to the original or the predecessor effort that was put forth within my organization, and how these statistics are actually, I can show you objective proof of how we were able to actually show that these are valid statistics. So the predecessor solution took up to 2 years. The team spent 2 years trying to develop an application that met this use case. And as I've touched upon several times, it ultimately met its demise because lack of user adoption. People just were not, they didn't have the time and they didn't have the patience to use the tool. Whereas with Salesforce, we spent 4 calendar months of work to develop a tool that has been adopted by 100% of the people within that user community, and they all love it. Over and above that user community, we've actually seen a couple other use cases within our organization where people are beginning to use it for other types of project management type work and issues tracking and resolution functions and things of that nature. So it's actually meeting needs of groups over and above the initial user community at which it was aimed to serve. In terms of cost, refraining from giving actual figures, but the development and implementation costs associated with the clinical trial development tool comes at less than 5% of the cost that was laid out for the predecessor effort. So that's a pretty substantial savings, and naturally put a smile on a lot of our senior management stakeholders' faces whenever we brought the cost and benefit analysis to their eyes. So all of these things leading into why we chose Salesforce and how we were able to be incredibly successful over a short amount of time in delivering a solution on the platform. So at this time, I guess our next agenda item is to turn over to Roman to provide a brief overview of the tool and what we built.
Great. Well, thank you, Bill. So before we turn things over to Roman for today's demonstration, we would like just to highlight 4 core points that are going to be discussed as part of the demonstration. So first and foremost, we want to be able to showcase how Salesforce can address the challenges that Bill just described with respect to clinical trial design. Secondly, we want to be able to highlight how the clinical trial design solution, which is a lightly structured framework that sits on an otherwise unstructured process, can support such a tedious effort with respect to protocol design efforts. But as you will see, that application or that capability could definitely be extended into other use cases, which we'll be discussing as well after today's demonstration. Thirdly, we want to be able to highlight the power of Salesforce in terms of how flexible the platform is with respect to supporting these rapidly changing processes that we often encounter in the R&D space. And then finally, provide a framework for the audience so there's a greater awareness and understanding of how the platform can be, lightly coded to allow for not only the support of this use case, but many other use cases within the R&D space.
Hello, this is a brief demonstration of clinical trial design tool. This tool helps R&D team to collaborate on building study protocols, develop ideas and decisions, and support them with knowledge and evidence. As a result, this tool serves as an institutional memory knowledge base and provides tools to capture short-term operational knowledge around designing clinical trial protocols and long-term reusable knowledge of past studies. Not only does this tool work as knowledge management application, it also provides means to capture and track all day-to-day activities for the study team. On the home page, I can see all recent activities that I have to complete. These are my tasks and calendar events where I am invited to participate in brainstorming sessions. A program page contains all the descriptive information about ongoing clinical trial, and on the top you can see design elements. So these are the categories that are used to capture and structure all the content inside the environment. Below, you can see a timeline, a visual representation of all the knowledge captured during the design phase for this particular trial. And it's interactive. You can either scroll back and forth in time, you can switch on and off different categories, and by rolling your mouse over, you can read the decision that was made in the past. That helps to gather all the memory, all the knowledge around designing clinical trial, and for an R&D team member be able to answer questions why certain decisions are made and what is the supporting documentation, supporting knowledge to justify this decision. This tool helps to gather and structure information on the program level and then split it by different phases. This tool is able to build and generate Microsoft Word or PDF documents with the study protocol options that later can be taken to external approval. Notes are unstructured pieces of information that an R&D team member can either create straight in the system or send an email to the predefined email address that would be converted automatically into a record in the system with all the attachments that I may find useful. Below, you can see all the decisions that are also visible on the timeline, but in a table view. And I can easily filter decisions by categories by switching on and off different tags on the top of the table and be able to see only those decisions that are relevant to my search criteria. For those who cannot collaborate offline, the tool provides means to use Chatter and capture all the collaboration process inside the environment. When I am on a meeting, I can use this tool to capture all the unstructured meeting notes in my email and then send it to the predefined address to the environment, and that email would be converted into the unstructured note. And later, I can go into the system and actually structure everything that I have written down. I can just select a piece of information that was discussed during that meeting, create new decision, name it, put a timestamp for it, put a category, and click Save. Now, if I would go back to my study, I would be able to see that decision on the timeline. So this is a decision that we have just created, and by drilling into the decision, I can see that it came from a meeting that was held last year. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Roman, for the demonstration. Everyone, for this following section, we're going to be focusing on an overview of the R&D workbench. In this section, we're specifically discussing how we believe we can extend the use case of Force.com within R&D and highlighting a separate use case in addition to what we described earlier around clinical trial memory design within the area of vendor management. So first, we wanted to kind of talk about what we believe are the strengths and the capabilities of the R&D workbench from the following perspectives. So typically, when we're talking with customers today across the R&D area, you're hearing the following core themes and challenges. First is concept of internal-external collaboration. Secondly is this aspect of process management and how do we effectively manage and oversee our processes end-to-end for both regulated and non-regulated processes. The ability to share information, both internally as well as externally, and this concept of traceability and governance. All that comes together in the form of reporting and analytics. And so what we believe the R&D workbench has in terms of capabilities that are well suited for the R&D area is really in the concept of the following, right? First and foremost, the ability to integrate data from disparate sources, really by creating a common business process management layer. Secondly is this concept of process automation, where in the past you might have had to enter information in duplicate, sometimes in triplicate, but creating the ability to automate content sharing as well as populating core fields just by entering information once versus twice. The aspect of collaboration and mobility is going to be highly critical, especially for virtual organizations, but even more so in the concept of mobility, being able to access the platform via cloud technology and via your mobile device is proving to be an increased area of interest for end users within R&D. Security is, obviously a core area of interest, and we put it there just for reference. And then finally, reporting and analytics. Really, how do we drive the information to the executive layer? And not just understanding where the current project or initiative stands, but how do we leverage historical data for prospective use? So in concept, we're viewing Force.com as the platform of choice to support multiple use cases across R&D. This slide is just highlighting those use cases specifically within the clinical domain, and we further segmented those capabilities in the following areas. First and foremost, portfolio management and administration. Secondly, in the area of patient oversight. Thirdly, in the area of sponsor and site management. And finally, in the last point, study oversight. In the area of study oversight, just as an example, we highlight the use case earlier on around study design. And we believe that capability can be extended into those other areas that I just described. What we're really trying to do is help organizations drive towards a higher degree of consistency in terms of how they're aggregating and maintaining their information, really with the end goal of being able to reuse information over time. Again, this concept of leveraging historical data for prospective use, and then more importantly, instituting best practices to ensure that organizations can effectively manage and maintain their processes across these domains. So what we want to be able to conclude on is just kind of talking about this challenge around vendor management. And in a follow-on webinar, what we're going to be talking about are the outcomes and how we are solving this challenge. But just for today, I want to provide a short teaser in terms of providing the audience an understanding of another area that's being addressed through the R&D workbench. So when we're dealing with vendor management, specifically in the R&D space and more poignantly within CRO oversight, the challenge continues to be, as described earlier, around how can we improve our data quality and consistency, and how can we aggregate information for greater vendor analysis. In the traditional sense, as described in the bottom process diagram, a number of these activities, step 1 through step 5, are really being performed in silos. So for example, step 1 in terms of RFI, RFP creation and response, supported through technologies like Ariba or even Microsoft Excel. CRO, RFP, response analysis or vendor analysis, largely supported through Excel spreadsheets, and procurement reviewing a litany of information in order to assess the best vendor for the project. In terms of CRO analysis as it relates to ongoing study effort and performance, it's typically supported through either a layer of analytics, but the core challenge there in steps 3 and steps 4 is how do we aggregate data from disparate sources in order to be able to drive greater awareness and analysis of performance of studies relative to CRO's activities. And finally, this last step in terms of developing metrics and benchmarks been proving very difficult for organizations to retrieve historical data for prospective use. So we believe that creating a common business process management layer will allow organizations to, number one, maintain cohesiveness and continuity across the steps that I just described, but more importantly, allow organizations to be able to retrieve that historical data for prospective use to assess what's the true cost or effort that's going to be required for future studies. So in a summary, what we're trying to drive towards are greater efficiencies. So by driving towards a consistent layer, organizations are able to save money, but in some cases allow for an expedited delivery of the given project or of the given study as a consequence of being able to assess the vendor's performance for the given project. So at this point, we want to be able to conclude today's session and open up the floor for questions, and would welcome the first question at this time.